The comfortable silence in our car was a blanket, thick and warm. I reached across the center console, my fingers finding my husband marks on the gear shift. He gave my hand a gentle squeeze without taking his eyes off the rain-slicked highway stretching before us. The rhythmic thump-thump of the windshield wipers was a lullaby after a long, satisfying weekend at the lake house with friends. "Think the cats missed us?" I asked, leaning my head back against the headrest. Mark chuckled, a low, familiar sound that always made me feel safe. "Bruce, definitely. He's probably sitting in the window right now, judging the neighbors with that grumpy face of his. Luna, she's probably hidden under the bed, waiting to emerge with maximum drama." I smiled, watching his profile. The faint lines around his eyes, earned from years of smiling and squinting into the sun on construction sites, seemed softer in the dim evening light. We'd been married for 12 years, and in many ways, we were a perfect, well-oiled machine. We knew each other's coffee orders, each other's annoying habits. I left mugs everywhere, he was a chronic channel flipper, and each other's silent moods. We were happy, at least, I thought we were. I believed our foundation was solid, built on a bedrock of shared history and quiet love. That bedrock was about to be tested in a way I could never have imagined. We were about 20 minutes from our suburban San Diego neighborhood, the city lights beginning to paint the underbelly of the clouds a faint orange. The traffic was light. Up ahead, a small, beat-up sedan was weaving slightly in its lane. "Whoa, someone's had a long Sunday," Mark commented, his grip tightening on the wheel as he smoothly changed lanes to give the car a wide berth. I nodded, a prickle of unease replacing my drowsy contentment. We slowed for a red light at a large, multi-lane intersection. The beat-up sedan stopped in the lane next to us. I glanced over, my window parallel with theirs. The interior light was on, revealing a young woman, maybe in her early 20s, her face pale and streaked with tears. She was gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles were white. In the passenger seat, a man was leaning into her space, his face a mask of cold, controlled anger. Even from a distance, through 2 panes of glass, the venom in his expression was palpable. "Mark," I said quietly, my voice tight. "I see them," he murmured, his gaze fixed on the scene. The light turned green. The sedan lurched forward, and we followed, the uneasy feeling in my stomach growing. For the next half-mile, the man in the passenger seat continued his tirade. We couldn't hear the words, but we could see the jerky, aggressive movements of his hands, the way he jabbed a finger towards the woman's face. She flinched, her shoulders hunching as if trying to make herself smaller. Then, it escalated. We were on a long, overpass bridge with no immediate shoulder. The man suddenly raised his hand and brought it down, not with a full-force slap, but with a sharp, stinging crack against the woman's arm. It was a gesture of pure contempt, of ownership. She cried out, a sound we could just barely hear, and the car swerved dangerously towards the concrete barrier. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Mark, he just hit her." Mark's jaw was a hard line. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "I know, I'm calling 911. He fumbled for his phone, handing it to me. "You dial." I'm not letting them out of my sight. My hands trembled as I unlocked the phone and punched in the numbers. The 911 operator's calm voice was a stark contrast to the adrenaline screaming through my veins. I gave her our location, a description of the car, the license plate number I'd frantically memorized. "The passenger, a male, just assaulted the female driver," I said, my voice shaking. "We're following them. They're on the I-5 southbound, just past the Mission Valley exit." The operator told us to stay on the line and to not intervene. The sedan took the next exit, ours. A cold dread washed over me. They were heading into our neighborhood. We followed at a distance, my phone pressed to my ear, relaying every turn to the dispatcher. The streets here were quieter, lined with apartment complexes and strip malls. The sedan finally pulled into the parking lot of a small, shabby-looking apartment building. "They're stopping," I whispered into the phone. "The Pines Apartments, on Elm Avenue." Mark pulled our car into the lot of a closed dentist's office across the street, killing the engine but leaving the phone connected. We were shrouded in shadow, watching. The man got out first, slamming the car door with a force that echoed in the quiet night. He stormed around to the driver's side, yanked the door open, and grabbed the woman by the arm, hauling her out. She was sobbing now, pleading with him, her words lost to the distance but her terror crystal clear. "The police are on their way," the operator said in my ear. "Please remain where you are." But Mark was already moving. His hand was on the door handle. "Mark, no," they said not to intervene. I hissed, grabbing his arm. He looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes stole my breath. It wasn't just anger. It was a deep, primal fury I had never seen before. It was a look that transformed my gentle, easygoing husband into a stranger. I can't just sit here, Sarah, he said, his voice low and gravelly. I can't watch this. Before I could protest further, he was out of the car, striding across the street. My blood ran cold. I dropped the phone onto the seat, the operator's tiny voice still chirping, and scrambled over the center console to roll down the window, my own fear a metallic taste in my mouth. Hey, Mark's voice cut through the night, sharp and commanding. Get away from her. The man, who was dragging the woman towards the apartment stairs, stopped and turned. He was bigger than I'd realized, with a thick neck and a sneer that was visible even from across the street. Mind your own business, man, he snarled, puffing his chest out. You're making it my business, Mark said, stopping a few feet from them. His posture was rigid, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Let her go. The police are on their way. At the mention of the police, the man's bravado flickered, but he didn't let go of the woman's arm. This is between me and my girlfriend. You got no right. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion, yet it was over in a heartbeat. The woman, seeing a potential distraction, tried to pull her arm free. The man's reaction was instantaneous and brutal. He snarled, "You don't get to walk away from me," and raised his hand to strike her again. Mark moved. It wasn't the calm, de-escalating intervention I had hoped for. It was a blur of raw, unleashed force. He closed the distance in 2 long strides. He didn't shout, he didn't warn. He simply grabbed the man's raised arm, twisted it in a way that looked both efficient and painfully effective, and drove his other fist into the man's stomach. The man let out a choked gasp, his grip on the woman breaking as he doubled over. Mark didn't stop. He shoved him, hard, sending him stumbling back against the side of the sedan with a sickening thud. The man slid down to the pavement, wheezing and clutching his midsection. The world went silent except for the frantic pounding of my heart. I was frozen, my hands gripping the car door, my mouth agape. Mark stood over the man, his chest heaving. He wasn't done. The fury was still radiating off him in waves. He looked feral. It was the only word for it. You ever touch her again? Mark's voice was low, a deadly whisper I had to strain to hear, and I will find you. Do you understand me? You are nothing. You are less than nothing. He leaned down, getting right in the man's face. The man, now terrified, could only nod, his eyes wide with shock and pain. In the distance, the welcome sound of sirens finally pierced the night. The young woman was pressed against her car door, shaking, staring at Mark with a mixture of gratitude and terror. Mark finally stepped back. He looked at the woman, and his voice, when he spoke to her, was softer, but still strained, still vibrating with that unsettling energy. You're safe now. The police are here. Tell them everything. Then, he turned and walked back towards our car. He didn't look at the man groaning on the pavement. He didn't look at me. He just walked, his movements stiff, his head down. He slid back into the driver's seat just as 2 police cars screeched into the parking lot, their red and blue lights painting the scene in stark, alternating flashes. The silence inside our car was no longer comfortable. It was heavy, suffocating, and fractured. Mark didn't start the car. He just sat there, his hands resting on the wheel, staring straight ahead. The knuckles on his right hand were raw and bleeding. I couldn't speak. I could only look at him. The man I had shared a bed with for 12 years, the man who cried at sappy commercials, who built elaborate pillow forts with our nieces, who was my best friend, my safe harbor, had just revealed a part of himself I never knew existed. The violence of it, the speed, the sheer, terrifying competence, it was alien. The police took our statements. We were just concerned citizens who had called it in. Mark downplayed his involvement, saying he had stepped in to separate them and the man had fallen. The young woman, whose name was Chloe, corroborated the story, her gratitude towards Mark evident through her tears. The boyfriend, whose name was Derek, was arrested for domestic assault. The police thanked us, told us we'd done the right thing, and we were free to go. The drive home was a 5-minute journey through a new and terrifying landscape. We didn't speak. I kept replaying the scene in my mind, the cold fury on Mark's face, the brutal efficiency of his movements, the whispered threat that carried more menace than any shout ever could. At home, Bruce the cat did indeed give us a judgmental stare from the windowsill. Luna was nowhere to be found. The normalcy of our house, with its framed photos and comfortable couch, felt like a lie. Mark went straight to the kitchen sink and began washing his hands, scrubbing at the blood on his knuckles with a ferocity that was disturbing. I stood in the doorway, hugging myself. "Mark," I began, my voice small. "I had to, Sarah," he said, not turning around. His shoulders were tense. "You saw what he was doing to her. Someone had to stop him." "I know," I said, and I did know, intellectually. What that man was doing was monstrous. "But, the way you did it, Mark, I've never seen you like that. You were scary." He finally turned off the water and turned to face me, leaning back against the counter. The anger was gone from his eyes, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. But the ghost of that other man was still there, lingering in the set of his jaw. "There are things about me, Sarah," he said quietly, "that I never wanted you to see." Those words hung in the air between us, a chasm opening up where our shared life had once been. "What does that mean?" I whispered. He ran a wet hand through his hair. "Before I met you, before I had this," he gestured around the kitchen, "at our life, I was different. I worked in some rough places. I had a short fuse. I got into fights. A lot of them. It was a problem." I stared at him. This was a history he had never so much as hinted at. The Mark one knew was the most even-keeled person I'd ever met. Conflict averse, even. "I got help," he continued, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I went to therapy for years. Anger management. I learned to box to channel it, to control it. I built this life with you, and it was my anchor. It kept that part of me buried. But tonight, seeing that piece of garbage put his hands on her, it unlocked something. All that control just vanished." He looked up at me, and his eyes were pleading. "I'm not that man anymore, Sarah. I swear to God, I'm not." But seeing that, it brought him back for a minute. I didn't know what to say. My mind was reeling. The foundation of our relationship wasn't just the shared jokes and the quiet Sundays, it was my perception of him as my gentle protector. Now, I had seen the protector, but he wasn't gentle. He was a weapon. That night, we slept in the same bed, but a mile of space lay between us. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it, the cold, precise violence in Mark's eyes. I felt a confusing cocktail of emotions, pride that he had stood up for someone vulnerable, fear of the darkness he had revealed, and a deep, unsettling sense of betrayal. Why had he hidden this from me? Who had I really married? The days that followed were a study in quiet tension. We tiptoed around each other. Our conversations were polite, surface level. "How was work?" "Fine. Yours?" "Busy." The easy physical intimacy we'd always shared, the casual touches, the goodnight kisses, was gone. When his hand brushed mine reaching for the salt shaker, I flinched. I saw the hurt flash in his eyes before he could hide it. I started noticing things I never had before. The way he could go completely still when he was frustrated. The sheer physical power in his shoulders when he moved furniture. I found myself studying the faint, silvery scars on his knuckles that I'd always assumed were from his work with tools. Now, I wondered. A week after the incident, I was cleaning out the closet in the garage and found a locked metal box on a high shelf, buried behind old winter coats. My heart started to pound. With a sense of dread and morbid curiosity, I found the key on his key ring, the one he never used for anything. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, there were no shocking secrets, no trophies of a violent past. There were a few faded photographs of a younger, harder-looking Mark, his eyes devoid of the warmth I knew, standing with men who looked just as tough. There was a tattered brochure for an anger management clinic. And at the bottom, folded carefully, was a newspaper clipping. It was a small, local piece from 15 years ago. The headline read, "Local man avoids jail time in bar assault case, sentenced to anger management." I read the article, my vision blurring. It described a brutal fight that had sent 2 men to the hospital. It named Mark. The man described in the article, quick-tempered, violent, was a stranger. I sank down onto the concrete floor, the clipping fluttering from my fingers. The pieces clicked into place. The therapy, the boxing, the constant, almost obsessive self-control. It wasn't just a personality trait, it was a cage he had built for a beast he knew lived inside him. That night, I confronted him. I placed the box on the kitchen table. His face went pale. He looked from the box to me, and I saw a profound shame in his eyes that broke my heart. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I asked, my voice thick with unshed tears. "Because I was ashamed," he said, his voice raw. "And because I was terrified of seeing the exact look that's in your eyes right now, Sarah." The fear, The doubt. You fell in love with the man I worked so hard to become. I didn't want you to ever have to know the boy I was. But he's still a part of you, Mark. I cried, gesturing towards the garage. I saw him. What happens if one day, something else sets you off? What if we have a terrible argument? What if it's directed at me? The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. The pain on his face was absolute. Never, he whispered, the word cracking. Sarah, look at me. I would sooner tear my own heart out than ever raise a hand to you. That violence, it's for monsters. For men like Derek, it's to protect, never to harm the people I love. You have to believe me. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But the seed of fear had been planted, and it had deep roots. We entered a period of cold, silent estrangement. We were roommates sharing a space, orbiting each other with a polite, profound sadness. I started individual therapy to process my fear and my sense of betrayal. I didn't ask Mark to come. This was my journey. My therapist helped me reframe the incident. She asked me to separate the action from the man I knew. Sarah, she said, the man you described, the one who builds pillow forts and cries at commercials, saw a woman being brutalized. The part of him that he had locked away, the part with the capacity for immense physical force, broke out to defend her. The action was violent, but the intention was protective. The monster you're afraid of was unleashed to slay a dragon for a complete stranger. It was a perspective I hadn't considered. I had been so focused on my fear of his darkness that I had minimized the true darkness of the situation he had stopped. Derek wasn't just a rude guy, he was a predator. The turning point came about a month later. We were at a grocery store, and a man in the parking lot was screaming at his elderly mother, who was struggling with a walker, calling her useless and a burden. I felt my own blood run cold with anger, but I froze, unsure of what to do. Mark, who had been silent and withdrawn for weeks, didn't hesitate. He walked over, calm and steady. He positioned himself between the man and his mother. "Sir," Mark said, his voice low and firm, but utterly controlled. It was the voice of the man I knew, infused with a new, unshakable authority. "That's no way to speak to your mother. Is there something I can help you with?" The man, startled, blustered for a moment, but Mark just stood there, a quiet, immovable wall. He didn't clench his fists. His jaw didn't tighten with that terrifying fury. He just de-escalated. He helped the woman with her walker, he loaded her groceries into her car, and he stared the son down until the man slunk into the driver's seat and drove away. Mark came back to me, his hands in his pockets. He looked at me, and for the first time in weeks, I saw clarity in his eyes. "I'm not that angry kid anymore, Sarah," he said softly. "What happened with Chloe, it was a trigger. It was a perfect storm of my worst history and a truly evil act. But that's not who I am now. This," he gestured to where the man had been, "is who I am now. I can use that strength, that presence, without losing control. I promise you." And in that moment, looking at him, at the man who had just protected a vulnerable elderly woman with calm strength instead of brute force, I finally understood. The incident in front of my husband hadn't created a monster, it had forced a hidden part of him into the light, and in doing so, it had given us a chance to truly integrate all of who he was. The man I loved wasn't just the gentle, funny guy. He was also the man with a warrior's spirit, a man who had fought a battle with his own demons and won. He was a man who possessed a dangerous strength, but who had the profound wisdom and love to wield it only as a shield, never as a sword. That night, for the first time in over a month, I reached for his hand in bed. His fingers laced through mine, tight, almost desperate. "I'm sorry I was so afraid," I whispered into the darkness. "Don't be," he whispered back, his voice thick with emotion. "It's my job to make you feel safe. And I failed at that. I'm so sorry, Sarah." "You didn't fail," I said, and I meant it. "You just showed me a deeper layer. And I'm not afraid of it anymore." What happened in front of my husband changed our relationship forever. It shattered the simple, surface-level happiness we had and forced us to build something new, something stronger and more honest. It's a relationship that now acknowledges the shadows as well as the light, the capacity for protection as well as the potential for harm. We don't have a perfect, easy love anymore. We have a real one. A love that has stared into the abyss and chosen, consciously and every single day, to hold on tight. And in its own way, that is so much better.